Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another episode of ReaperCast. Today I really wanted to talk about this particular topic, given that although it's an OCG and it's something I kind of wanted to put off because, like I said, it's OCG, it was just something that I really had to talk about given how significant it could be in the TCG later on. But basically, if you guys don't know by the title by now, this is the OCG Banlist, and the fact that it's coming right after our most recent TCG Banlist, it's definitely really interesting. Now, what I found really weird was that normally the OCG actually has like really small lists that are actually like a lot smaller than what the TCG offers, but given that our recent TCG list is so small and insignificant, it's really interesting to see that the OCG list is actually, well, there's actually a lot more cards being affected in this particular scenario. So let's actually go over all of these cards because you could clearly tell that the OCG list is very different from the TCG list. So firstly, the OCG had just decided to ban Grinder Golem, which is definitely quite a significant thing. I'm surprised that Grinder Golem wasn't even banned in OCG because that offers a lot of different plays, a lot of different combos, and I just think that's quite crazy. So seeing it banned now, I mean, it's no surprise. I'm surprised that, if anything, I was more surprised at the fact that it wasn't banned sooner. However, moving on to limited, we have Red Reboot. That kind of makes sense because in TCG, Red Reboot is also at 1, though I'd rather see it come back to 3 given how many cards are. There are a lot of cards I just don't like dealing with. For example, you don't want to go up against an Infinite Impermanence, you don't want to go up against a Harpy's Featherstorm. So cards like Red Reboot kind of saved me in those situations, but seeing that Red Reboot is now at 1 both in TCG and OCG, it's quite sad. Moving on, we also have here Nadir's Servant. I don't know too much about this card, but I'll take their word for it that it's a card that's definitely a problem. Next, we have Dino Wrestler Pankratops. Same thing for us in TCG, we already had Pankratops at 1 anyway, so seeing that it's being limited here in the OCG, again, it's another surprise because it's taken so long for them to actually put it at 1, whereas for us in TCG, it was a lot sooner. What I find even more interesting is the fact that the OCG cards have already been released a lot longer than the TCG cards as well, so seeing that it takes that long for a card in the OCG to go on the ban list as opposed to the TCG, it kind of feels unfair that us here in the TCG can't really utilize the card to the fullest extent before it gets banned, or if it gets hit to a very low number. Now I'm going to skip over the Firewall Dragon and come back to it, but we have here the semi-limited list. We have Doloran. It doesn't really matter, it could come back at 3. We have Wind-Up Magician. That's going to be quite interesting. Maybe Wind-Ups can do something, but we have no idea for now. I mean, it's obviously fallen off the radar for quite a while now. We also have Junk Speeder. Again, just another extended to bring back at 2, very interesting. We have Magical Meltdown coming back to 2. Honestly, 2 is really insignificant when it comes to Magical Meltdown because whether you have it at 3 or 2, it doesn't really do too much. However, if you make it into 1, that might actually cause a significant change. So it does feel kind of weird that they put it at 2. I mean, either put it at 3 or 1, because with 2, even if you play a Terraforming, you'd be playing 3 copies anyway, so I don't really see any purpose in putting it at 2. But next we have Cursed Eldline. Makes sense, I mean, I'm not going to complain about that. But next we have the Unlimited section. So for the Unlimited section, they got Fossil Dig back at 3 again. That's very surprising to me, of course. Fossil Dig is not so broken of a card. I just think it's a nice searcher, but it's not something that I would put on the ban list. I think if anything, you'd probably put Oviraptor on the list, more likely than Fossil Dig. Fossil Dig is, I don't know, I just think it's a spell card that has better viability towards more generic decks. Oviraptor, while it can be generic, it still has its own specificity with its effect to be able to destroy things, which makes a particular type of dinosaur deck really broken, you know, if you were to incorporate the True King variant of it. But yeah, with Fossil Dig, making it come back to 3, that's great. Tour Guide, same thing. Tour Guide has been off the radar for a long time now. It's no longer broken. And then we also have here Dark Refer coming back to 3. That is quite interesting to see, but again, it's not something that's going to affect the meta too much. However, let's go back to the main card now, and that is Firewall Dragon, which is very interesting that the OCG is actually giving an errata for Firewall Dragon. Does this mean that in the next list, the TCG will also give Firewall Dragon the same errata? I mean, I'd really love that, because Firewall Dragon is one of my most favorite cards in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh, really, at least in my top 10. So seeing it come back, it's going to be really exciting for the OCG at least. But for the TCG, I don't know, it makes me think like what's going to happen here, because yes, in the OCG, the Firewall Dragon has been errated. We know it's so broken, and yeah, you're right. It is a card that we saw coming. It was going to get banned anyway, but seeing an errata, especially for the OCG, which doesn't do erratas, it really makes things odd. I mean, what reason did they have to actually do this? You know, in the TCG, I'd understand it more, but will this actually suggest any changes to the next TCG list? I know that sometimes the TCG can be influenced by the OCG and vice versa, but it does make me feel kind of hopeful for Firewall to come back with an errata. Of course, I don't really like erratas to begin with, but I think for a card like Firewall Dragon, an errata would be quite appropriate. One of the issues with Firewall Dragon was the fact that it was not a hard once per turn. Your first and second effects could be utilized to the maximum amount, and even if Firewall Dragon was limited, you could still abuse the card like crazy. So it was definitely something that was considered to be really unfair. It was a tier 0 card on its own. So knowing that, Firewall Dragon, it only makes sense for it to actually have an errata to make it a hard once per turn for each of the effects. And that's definitely really good. However, to top that off, the second effect is now you have to special summon only Cyverse monsters from your hand. You can't special summon any monster, it must be a Cyverse monster. And you know what, that's really amazing. I play Cyverse anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And for Cyverse decks, there are still quite a lot of different kinds. For example, Salaman Greats are Cyverse monsters, At Ignistas are Cyverse monsters. So you can still abuse Firewall Dragon in certain decks, but now that each effect is at once per turn, and it's also limited to Cyverse monsters, it makes the card a lot more on the balancey side. In fact, it's no longer broken. I'm surprised that the OCG actually brought it back at 1, but you know what, maybe they're just going to test things out and see how they go, and if things go well, then it might even come back to 2 or 3. And I would like to see that in the TCG as well, because you're right, it's like the only way for Firewall Dragon to ever come off the ban list is to get an errata. That's not something we could argue with. It's a really broken card, but I really love the card, so this kind of errata it's not so crazy to the point where it destroys the card completely. It makes it playable, and it makes it a viable card, a viable boss monster, at least for Cyverse players. And that's how it should have been from the very beginning. So my personal opinion about this is that I really wish that Firewall would actually come back in the TCG with this exact same errata, where it's a hard once per turn for each effects and it's only limited to Cyverse. Do you guys actually think that's fair? Because, you know, like I said, I'm not really a big fan of erratas. For example, they ruined Crush Card Virus, they ruined Chaos Emperor Dragon, but for Firewall Dragon, I don't think they would ruin it with this particular errata. This was actually something I can agree with. But tell me what you guys actually think about this. However, that's pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like and also share this video. Don't forget to comment as well, it actually helps out a lot for this video. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos just like this. But in the meantime, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.